Welcome, everyone. Hopefully I can be entertaining enough to prevent the post-lunch food coma. Today I'm going to be talking about harnessing ChatGPT for domain-driven design. Now, the goal of my presentation is not to definitively answer, is there potential for AI in domain modeling? What I would like to do is kind of spark your curiosity, help you learn from some of the lessons I learned, and then also kind of start you on a good path to where you can answer that question for yourself. So let's get right into it. I'm Phil Bohnenkamp. I am a software developer. I've been in the industry almost 25 years now. I got formal domain-driven design training from Eric in 2010. I've been an avid practitioner and evangelist ever since. That's my Twitter and LinkedIn profiles. I don't post a lot. My goal is to post more, so hopefully that'll change. So let's dive right into it. I wanted to give this little buzzword map because I think it sets a good understanding of how all these buzzwords that are being thrown around by the media these days. It helped me focus on what I needed to know. So starting, you heard Eric talk about machine learning today. Well, the one way to accomplish machine learning is deep learning. And deep learning is an algorithm that's backed by a neural network. So think of your brain, and we're trying to mimic how the brain works. So out of these deep learning algorithms, two kind of models emerged. Your predictive models, which think of optical character recognition and kind of things of that nature that can predict if something is there or happened. And that's been in the industry and widely used for years now. Like the post office system has had optical character recognition since I think the mid-90s. So those models have been around a long time and they're kind of old news. The new models, the generative models, so generative models, instead of predicting something that can happen, they generate content based on your input. Now, generative models have been around for a long time too, but they just hadn't had any practical application. They were so limited that there was no practical use for them. Until 2017, a group of researchers came together and published a paper on this transformer-based model that they had been working on. And that's what led to our current large language model craze. Out of the transformer-based models, and this categorization is probably blurring now, but you got their large language models, which are your traditional GPT 3.5, Mistral, Llama. They're text-based, natural language processing. Then you have your multimodal models, which do image, audio, or a combination thereof. And GPT-4, Claude 3, Gemini 1.5, those have all come out recently that support multimodal models. And by no means am I an expert. I think I am a maybe mid-beginner. So this could change in an instant. And these models may not be absolutely correct, but they helped my understanding and helped my journey to where I could apply them. So a little bit more about the transformer-based models. They are trained on what they call a vocabulary. So they are, before they're deployed to use, they have to be trained. And this vocabulary consists of tokens. So once they're trained adequately, they get deployed, and then you can query them with prompts. So once you query a transformer-based model with a prompt, that prompt gets split up into tokens. And you can see this is an example, part of one of my prompts that I'll use later on, and how it gets broken up. So this tool, the tokenizer tool, can tell you how many tokens you have and kind of how it's being broken up. The question of how many tokens you have gets into, so once your prompt is broken up into tokens, it gets put into a context window. So this context window has a fixed size. It has to because of performance, memory, and compute power constraints. The context window model size equals your prompt plus the answer it gives. So the way these transformer-based models work is they take your prompt, tokenize it, put it in the context window, run it through the algorithm, and the algorithm projects the next token. Then it puts that into the context window, feeds it back through the algorithm to predict the next token, and it's kind of that iterative, and that's why it takes, if your context window is like Gemini's is 1 million tokens, you can see a lot of compute power going into that. So if you have 1 million tokens. Now, I know Eric spoke a little bit about prompt engineering this morning. I won't go too much more detail. There's a Twitter handle out there for Matt Schumer. I've seen some of his tweets, and he's basically tweets a lot of good ways to interact with different models like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude 3 most recently. So it's worth following if you're interested in that. But as Eric said, these prompts, it's almost like an art form. You have to really get them right for your query and answer to be useful. And then I won't go too much into this, the fine-tuning and RAG that Eric did a good job of summarizing that, and he actually used it more than I did. I did not go into this. I used just the base model of ChatGPT or the chat interfaces for these LLMs. Just note that if you do go into this, like he said, it can get expensive quickly. So ChatGPT 4 is $20 a month. That's not too bad, but I spent probably $20 just some playing around with the OpenAI Studio for some of the things I was trying to do. So it can build up quick. All right. So the way I organized this talk is I used this domain-driven design starter modeling process. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, it gives structure and guidance for learning and practically applying DDD. I chose this because I think it fits well with all my experimentation. It kind of frames where my experimentation fell in this step-by-step process. We'll start right with align. I didn't do this. This is not my strength, and the example I am working with just didn't warrant this type of strategic thinking or modeling. Somebody is, though, experimenting with this. This is a post from Simon Wardley of the Wardley map. He is using Claude 3 to generate Wardley maps, and it's very cool. I suggest you follow him on Twitter. He's been posting quite a bit around this topic. So if this is your, if you want to experiment more in this, he would be a good person to follow. All right. So this is where I started, in the discover phase. And this is what I'm discovering. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is a cribbage game. It's a card game that's played on what you see there is a cribbage board. I'm in a cribbage league. And it's just a social league. It's not very competitive. But we meet every Wednesday night and play another, a pair of us meet and play another team. And I saw all the work that the league manager, who is the owner of the co-owner of the brewery and a brewer, put into this little social league. It was a lot of manual steps. He worked with spreadsheets, and we've handed in a paper-based score sheet at the end. And just all the things he had to do, I'm like, oh, this is a software application waiting to be written. And I figured, oh, it's already been written. It wasn't. There's larger scale out there for like court sports, so where you need tennis, and you need to reserve a court, and it's maybe spread across the week, the whole matches, but nothing for small and medium-sized social leagues like this. Think of dart leagues, maybe even like tabletop gaming leagues, or video game leagues. Pinball is another example that I've done. So I was like, it kind of rolled around in my head, and then I saw all this stuff work with AI starting to help developers and business product managers. And so I'm like, there's a connection there. Maybe I can use AI in this to help me do this on my free time, and it would make it more approachable. And then the call for proposals for DDD came out, Explore DDD, and I was like, oh, there's a perfect synergistic moment there. I can have other people learn from what I am doing. So if this isn't a picture of the quintessential Wisconsin brewer, bar owner, I don't know who is. This is Tommy. This is the league manager. He's a great guy. So I sat down with Tommy, and I knew I wasn't going to get a lot of his time. He is a very busy man. He's running a business and brewing and running the current league in progress. So I knew I had to get an initial, basically, I had one meeting, and then I'd have to go from there on my own. So that's what I did. I started without AI and just did a traditional event storming session. I mapped out his current as-is process using this. So I know this is very hard to read, so let me ask ChatGPT to summarize it. Now, what you see here me doing is I'm selecting the main timeline. There's a couple themes down there that I didn't put into this. But I tried to write a plugin that would take, this is a Miro plugin, that takes a timeline from an event storming session and will generate a prompt based on this that I can feed into ChatGPT. So this is the prompt. You don't have to read it all, but some of the most important points I want to make are, you can see in the, let's see if I can get the substitutions there. Turns out the LLMs know how to substitute $ variables. I don't know if that was trained into them or it just appeared naturally, but that's a good way to kind of indicate substitutions in prompts. But yeah, you can see I have like events with orange are, sticky notes with orange are events. The pink are hotspots. So this is my prompt. I copied that prompt that I generated and pasted it into the LLM, and I asked it to summarize for me. So turns out it was able to understand the event storming session, which is kind of cool. Don't read this. I've sped it up pretty far because it does get into it, though you can summarize. So like Eric said, ChatGPT 4 is pretty wordy. I thought that was an accomplishment. So now I have event storming data, and I can feed it into a chat in a way that it can understand. So you can see it pulled out the actors. So it did that. It got a high-level process flow. It pulled out a couple of the policies that I had there. It said there was some high-effort hotspots. It didn't really identify them, but sure, not too bad. So the other chat bot that I interacted with because I had success with using it was Gemini Advanced. So let's contrast how Gemini Advanced takes this same prompt and deals with it. And if you have a chance, if you can do like this, pit these AIs against each other, it's actually useful exercise I've found. So you can see this long summary is a little more structured. It gives a little higher, a little more detail in the process flow, and it pulled out the actual hotspots that were related to the events. So I thought that was really cool. And I asked it to summarize it in a slide here too. And I think Gemini kind of won this challenge. It did a better job. So, okay. Just to give you a close-up of some of the event storming data here, you can see I had league manager, participating team, high efforts. It's like participant responses when the season's starting. Matcher, the score sheet tallying, and then distributing the results of the week. So yeah, it did a pretty good job. The other thing is like, okay, summarizing is fine, but what can I do with that summary data? And one thought I had is, well, a lot of times it's useful to have this, like the results of event storming session summarized in like a wiki or even in your code base as Markdown. So these LLMs can output Markdown from your answers quite easily. ChatGPT did a very much better job of when you ask it to, it actually puts it in Markdown. Gemini, I probably had to prompt it once or twice every time. It's like, I want raw Markdown code. And even though I use the same prompt, it would give me the formatted markdown versus the raw. And like I'd have to say, no, really, give me the raw stuff. And it's like, oh, absolutely. So just a little quirk there. But I thought that was pretty useful. So with this data, I was hoping, okay, I want to use this data of the as-is process. Can the LLMs help me generate a to-be process? And one of the ways I thought a good format for that to-be process would be is domain storytelling. So I'm like, okay, let's ask it to give me a to-be process as in the domain storytelling format. And I fed it the event storming data again. Sometimes you don't have to, just a note on the prompts. In ChatGPT and at Gemini Advanced, it will remember a certain amount of your prompt, and it will save prompts for you. So if you want to go on to a different topic, you can create a new prompt and go back to your old one. But as you can see, if you guys are familiar with the domain storytelling format, it's not really the format of domain storytelling. It doesn't call out each actor. It doesn't call out each action or the work item. It did a high level, okay, this should be what need to happen. So then I asked it, hey, spit it out in this exact format and described it. And again, it tried to. This is ChatGPT. And it didn't really do a good job of formatting. And that could be my prompt problem. But it wasn't that insightful either. So I'm like, all right, this is not really insightful. So I thought, well, can I use this data to jumpstart a diagram for my own insights? So I tried, if you guys are familiar with Egon, this is a tool that Henning and Stefan have developed that's on the web that will diagram out domain storytelling for you. It's a great tool. It's very powerful in its simplicity. So I was like, it has an input and output feature. This is just me demonstrating. You can also, once you create a story, you can walk through it via this tool too. So I thought, well, what if I can use the output of that instead of just getting that text-based output, what if I could use the input format of the Egon, the EGN file? And this is kind of what it looks like. It's just JSON text. It's not a binary format or anything. It's JSON. And I'm like, oh, that should work, right? Not so much. I tried for a long time. I mean, I spent a couple days heads down work on this, trying to get just the chat prompts to generate this type of structured data. And it just couldn't. It couldn't determine the spatial relationships, so like the X and Y coordinates. It was too much of a leap. What I did was, okay, that's fine. This tool is easy enough to use on its own. So let me just go through and do my own scenario. And this is a big picture scenario of what I'm calling League-Ace is the system. So then I had the thought, well, can I do the same thing with with Egon that I did with Miro? Can I take this data from a diagram and structure it in such a way that an LLM can digest? You can export this file directly. I tried that, fed it into the chat prompts, and both of them really didn't do a good job with it. Gemini Advanced, it was too much data even for the prompt, so it just puked and said, I can't do this. Try something else. ChatGPT was able to handle the whole file, but it started talking about waypoints and picked colors and that type of thing. So it just didn't handle it well. And then I thought, okay, there's a lot of information that the LLM doesn't need for my usage. So I'm like, ChatGPT, can you help me out? I want to write a script to knock down this file into just the points that it needs. And I suggested set at the beginning. And for those of you familiar with old Unix commands, that was the first thing that came to my mind. And then ChatGPT is like, oh, you want to use JQ? And I'm like, oh, yeah, duh. So it's kind of helpful. Just a little lesson there and there. So I asked ChatGPT to write me a script to knock down this file. And it did just that. It output this script. I modified it a little bit. That with entries section I added on the end, What that did was get rid of if there was elements that didn't have those properties, they would spit out null at the first prompt, or the first script. So that with entries not equal to null will take those out. So the tokenization of this input file was around 13,000 tokens without this filtering. When I filtered it down, it came, for all that scenario that I had, it came down to 2,600 tokens. So it quartered it, which was nice. And then along with the data now, I had to explain to the LLMs, to the prompt, to digest that data. This is just a snippet of it. It's ugly, I'm sorry, but I'll have a GitHub repo with the actual prompts that I used that you can link to at the end. But you can see, I'm telling it, hey, solely work object elements are characterized by elements with type work object and a description. Activities are, they are associated to a source and a target. So you can see kind of how I structured the prompt. So I pasted this data into ChatGPT, and I asked it just to summarize it because I wanted to know if it understood it. And it did to some extent. I think if I'd done the prompting a little bit better and experimented more with that, I think I could have gotten it a little more accurate. But it didn't do a bad job. There's one thing that I didn't add to the prompt was the kind of ordering as well as I should have, and I think that would have helped. So summaries are good ways of testing if your prompt is working, but they're not terribly useful when you're domain modeling, right? So I thought, what can I do with this data for something that frustrates me in the real world? And one of the things was, I know ubiquitous language is very important, but how many of you have been on teams where the ubiquitous language has never been written down or maintained? I think that is a failure that I've seen on all my projects, and I'm guilty of it myself. And I'm like, well, it's hard to maintain in the first place, and it's probably hard to put together in the first place. So what if I can use this data from these live human sessions, these domain modeling sessions, to help generate and maintain that? So I asked ChatGPT and Gemini Advanced to give me a ubiquitous language from this data. So this is Gemini. Not bad. I think it's a good starting point. It pulls out, like you can see, I gave it both the event storming data and the domain storytelling data. So the bonus points that it pulled out, that was only in the event storming data. And you know, I had forgotten about it up until this point. I'm like, oh, bonus points, yeah, I forgot. That's a scenario I got to account for. So it's pretty cool. ChatGPT did not do as well as Gemini on this task. So ChatGPT is a little more wordy, and I think if I prompted it better, it wouldn't have added like high effort. I mean, that's not going to be part of your ubiquitous language. That was part of the description of what the sticky note represented. And you'll see other things like that, like the calendar. That was an icon I used on the story, it wasn't what the icon was signifying. So, okay, a little failure there, maybe with some more prompting. Oh, excuse me. So now, I think of this as, well, as you could feed this glossary into the prompt again, and more data, and say, hey, update this ubiquitous language for me. I didn't get that far in experimentation, but I'll leave that for another day, or you guys. All right, so let's hit you can barely see the decompose strategy, strategize steps. I was like, well, now that I have like a big high-level scenario with domain storytelling, can I use this to help me start decomposing this domain into subdomains and bounded contexts? So here I was a little bit lazy with the prompt. because this was in my context, and I took advantage of it. So all that data was in my context. And I prompted it, hey, what are the different domains that you see here? And rank them according to core, supporting, and generic. So it started, this is ChatGPT. It pulled out some core domains. League management, definitely. Team and player management, maybe, maybe not. I could see that maybe being more supporting. Match and schedule management, yeah. Tournament management, yeah, I could see that, because one of the things, instead of just a whole league, a lot of these places do just day tournaments, like once a month or for special occasions. And that could be a feature set or another domain for this, for league A's. You can see it pulled out a couple supporting venue management, maybe, maybe not. Results, reporting, and standings. I think you could almost gamify this, the social aspect, so that, to me, might be core domain. But the most important part of this is it started me thinking. It gave me a starting point. There's not, this is Gemini Advanced. It did about the same job as ChatGPT with this task. So I don't do this type of decomposition in my day-to-day work. Usually I do this once every couple of years, because I come in and I like to be on long-term projects, because I think that's where my skill set lies and where I learn the most, and I like to curate long-term applications. So I don't do this often, and I can suffer from analysis paralysis. And this immediately, when I just asked this question, it got me thinking, oh, I don't think that's a core domain, but this might be. And it was just a useful for me in that context. Like, did it give like an experienced domain practitioner that does this a lot? They probably could have hashed this out in very little time and wouldn't need the LLM's help. But for me, this was very helpful. Okay, the define. So here I had not played with, this is a bounded context canvas. I'd not really done this before. So I was like, well, this could be a learning opportunity, and maybe the LLM could help me out with filling this out for my league management domain, subdomain. So I generated another prompt. It contained my domain storytelling data, the domain decomposition data that it generated. And then this is the style that Matt Schumer's prompts are, and so this is what I borrowed from him. But I told it, and I was very specific about the formatting this time. So you can see at the bottom there, I'm starting to write markdown in those substitutions. Again, this is not the whole prompt. You can see that in the Git repo at the end. But so I fed it this data, and it's like, hey, can you give me a bounded context canvas? And I didn't want to fill out the canvas template directly. I wanted the text-based because I didn't even want that challenge. But so this is ChatGPT's output. The output was kind of verbose, and it was easier for me to do it this way versus a video of the GPT window generating the content. But purpose, not too bad. Again, the strategic classification, it got that right. It said this was a core domain just based on the data. Domain roles, didn't really understand the domain roles of a bounded context canvas. I think had I prompted maybe this data in there, or we maybe fine-tuned with more bounded context canvas instructions, that it would have recognized and done this differently. Gave a little bit of cross-domain communication, not too bad. Again, it was a little limited here. ChatGPT did a better job with the ubiquitous language in this scenario, which was nice. I thought that was cool. And this is the other stuff. The only one I want to really call out is open questions. How does the system handle conflicts or changes in league settings after the season has started? I'm like, that got me thinking, oh gosh, I'm going to have to account for that, aren't I? So it can be useful. Again, those of you that are bounded context Canvas wizards probably say, oh, I can do this. It wouldn't have been a problem. But for me, it was a new experience. I learned a lot, and it gave me a starting point. This is the Gemini Advanced. It was a little more succinct than ChatGPT, of course, and it usually is. The domain roles, I think it did a little better job of understanding that. League administration would probably be the role, but a scheduler is a good role there, and registrar. Inbound communication did about the same. Ubiquitous language, it didn't spit out as many, but it did pull out the two important ones, league and season. And it has some good open questions also. So how do we handle league or season cancellations and communicate? That's one of the scheduling conflicts too, was one of the pain points in one of those themes of the event storming session I did with Tommy. He wanted this league to be social, so if two teams canceled on the same night, he didn't want two teams not playing. So he would readjust the schedule for the rest of the season, so those two teams would play each other, or if they'd already played each other, he'd have to even do more jiggling. But he wanted he didn't want teams playing each other more than once in a season. So there's a lot of work there. So I think that's more exploration I'm going to do in the core domain. Okay, code. Now, I really wanted to get a deep dive into the code. Unfortunately, I didn't have time. And I thought this presentation would have been, it could have been a 45-minute presentation on its own. There's a lot of coding, AI videos and chat instructional content out there right now. It's not really domain-driven design focused, I don't think. It's very, very specific to your co-pilot. Like you type in something and it suggests what the next part of the code could be. There are some more AIs coming out that will look at your whole repository, and then you ask it a question, I want to generate a class to do this, and it will look at your whole repository and suggest code from that. Was it Devon just came out 2 days ago, which says it can do this type of work. One thing I did experiment with is I was wondering, well, I like to do test-driven development and behavioral-driven development. I asked it, well, can it spit out some BDD scenarios for me that I can start working with based on the data that I've given it? So this is the prompt. You're a world-class software engineer, deep expertise across programming languages. I don't know if you have to give it that role and that specific, but people say it works, so maybe. I have no proof for or against either. And so this is kind of the way I did it. And provide the BDD scenarios in Gherkin. And the feature I give it is the league manager creates a season using league A's. So it at least spit it out in Gherkin. You can see it didn't do too bad of a job. I'll stop it there for a bit. And you can see it's given, and it's not just one scenario. Scenario attempting to create a new season without specifying mandatory fields. Well, that's an easy case. Anybody can do that. Creating a season with an end date before the start date. Maybe that's something that you'd want to test for, or you wouldn't think of right away. Creating a new season when it already exists with overlapping dates, is that okay? We got registration deadline after. So it didn't do too bad of a job. It was okay in my book. It's a starting point. So something you can work off of, and hopefully you could get even more sophisticated with something like this and generate code from these, or testing code from these, or actually code that fulfills these requirements. Okay, let's wrap it up. The verdict: human intelligence is still required today. And I don't think that's going to change very quickly. This stuff is moving so fast that that could be a very wrong statement. But domain modeling expertise is still required, I think. But I think it is a new tool in our toolbox that could be quite powerful. And I think it deserves more study and experimentation. So I am going to do more myself, and I really hope all of you start to do that experimentation too, because like Eric said, it was fun. It's really cool to do this stuff, to get that working relationship with, and it is almost a relationship with the LLM. It's like it has its quirks just like any human would. So yeah, thank you. The link up in the corner is to the GitHub repo that has the prompts. There's some citations there that I used.